Well, today I'm here to talk about what is resilience and can it be cultivated? I really like this quote: rise above the storm and you will find the sunshine. So, why it's okay to feel the way that you do right now? Um, well, when you get frustrated, when you get sad, when you get confused, remember it's totally okay because we're basically living in wartime. We're at war against this virus. The virus is winning in America. We're also in a Cold War with China and Russia. We're in a political crisis, an environmental crisis, a racial crisis, a health crisis, a jobs crisis. It's pretty much entirely normal to feel bad right now. It's entirely normal to feel lonely. It's entirely normal to feel the way that you do. This is the new normal, and it's time for you to put your mask on first and to be kind to yourself, to care for yourself, to love more, and to love as much as you can right now because life is short. So learning to be resilient is good for your health. But what is resilience, right? Well, resilience is many things. And according to the research, there's really no consensus on this definition. But basically, it's a coping outcome, it's a developmental trajectory, and it's also a personality correlate or trait. So today I'm going to go through each of these different facets of resilience and how you can boost them. So resilience as a coping outcome. If you really think about resilience in terms of, for example, recovery from trauma or a major stressor, there's a bunch of different outcomes that you can have. You can have stress resistant resilience, where you basically you get hit with stress and you are fine. This is like superheroes, not really realistic. There's also bouncing back resilience, which is when you get hit with the stressor and you bounce back and you become, you basically bounce back to the original set point you were in to start with. There's also post-traumatic growth, when you get hit with a major stressor, but you grow and you become even better because of it. And then there's recovery to the set point, and there's also a delayed reaction to the stress, often with things like suppression. And then there's also lack of recovery. So some people actually just get sick and broken. There's a bunch of research that's coming out around resilience versus PTSD versus post-traumatic growth. And basically there's this idea that the trajectory of post-traumatic growth is a little bit different than recovery, which is like just the resilience of just getting better, but it's actually just getting better and thriving beyond the trauma that you experienced. And I think this should really be the goal for everyone's trajectory with current COVID-19 epidemic. Is we should all be aiming to experience this massive trauma and to grow from it and to actually thrive beyond it when it's over. So I'm hoping to be able to give you the tools to enable you to get to that place. Resilience to loss is interesting though. So I had a friend die last year, and his wife, who still remains alive, really suffered from a significant amount of loss from this death. And she actually was the one who taught me about post-traumatic growth. And I've had actually a few people that I know who've lost family members. And I think that it's important to understand that there's different ways to cope with loss, and there's different ways to end up stronger. So sometimes repressive coping facilitates the adaptation to loss. So sometimes when we've just gone through a major loss, a lot of things in our life need to be dealt with. The experience could be majorly threatening, but maybe you have to plan a funeral, or maybe you have to support some children, and you have to deal with the loss, and also deal with the consequences of that loss. Essentially, there's the stressful event and the appraisal of it, right? There's the experience of the stress, and then there's the way that we interpret the stress that makes it even more or less threatening. And essentially, some of the research suggests that when it comes to grief, that repressive coping of grief may in the short term enable a person to bounce back faster than for example, dealing with the grief head on. So essentially what I've included here is a case study of a friend who basically was falling apart. and she was grieving from her loss. And she said, I literally have to take care of my mom right now. I've got to move, I've got to work, and I don't know how to do this all. I feel like I'm drowning. And I said, okay, what if you were to take the grief and you put it in a box and said, I can return to this in a week, and focus all of your energy on the tasks at hand, making sure that your mom is okay, making sure that your move goes well, and then giving yourself space to actually grieve later on when you have the time to actually commit to it. And she actually said that the experience of being able to go through the grief at a later time and actually focus on her tasks at hand enabled her to better be resilient to the grief experience. And she felt much stronger afterwards and actually improved her relationship with her mom. Um, in case you haven't noticed, there's been a big move towards looking towards stoicism to actually handle the stress of life. And the reason why I think so many people are turning to stoicism is because it's really essentially this: focus on the things that you do have control over and try to not focus on the things that you don't. The Stoics elaborated a detailed taxonomy of virtue and developed into four main types: wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. I have to say that turning to a more stoic mindset during this COVID-19 epidemic has really brought me a greater sense of control over my own life. Now, resilience can also be a developmental trajectory. So a lot of people experience early life stressors, and some people experience significant stressors like adverse childhood experiences. And we know that these experiences in life and the effects of early life trauma depend on different hits, right? Depend on how many traumas are um, layered upon themselves in order to determine how an organism is able to adapt and become vulnerable or become resilient. So there's essentially early life social programming, epigenetic susceptibility, the programming that happens of a baby being born into a mother. So a mom might have significant stress during her pregnancy, and that will actually increase the child's likelihood of having a nervous system attuned to stress. And then there's also early life stress. So sometimes it's, adverse childhood experiences. Sometimes the baby had a really fairly healthy, childhood. And then there's later life stressors, things like, coping strategies. Maybe someone developed alcoholism as a coping strategy. All of these are going to determine whether or not an organism meets a place of adaptation and resilience, or is more likely to break down. And we know that adverse childhood experiences, and we know that babies born to mothers who have drug problems, we know that this changes their ability to thrive as in adulthood. So this idea of a multi-system model of resilience, and basically describes that there's all these different things that can affect, all these different factors that can affect our resilience. There's our core resilience, which is our biology, our gender, our stress, our physiology, our own health behaviors. And then there's the internal resilience, which is the interpersonal factors of how we interpret the world around us through our relationships with others, through our social groups, through our competence, knowledge, family, skills, and experience. And then there's the external resilience, which is these socio-ecological factors of things like our geography, our environment, politics, you name it. So as I've mentioned, there's inter-individual, resilience that can change our health behaviors, and that can actually change our core resilience profile. And then there's also interpersonal factors that that really we're shaped by our relationships with our family and our friends, that will teach us adaptive coping styles. It teaches us how to handle life within diversity. It teaches how to have social competence. It teaches how to have grit. Not everyone gets that kind of training. Not everyone gets that kind of interaction with others that leads to better hardiness or self-control or regulation. And then there's also these external factors, these things like exposure to healthcare and social services and social connectedness and education and family relationships that can help determine whether or not we're resilient or not. And then there's, to further elaborate on resilience as a developmental trajectory, there's factors that promote resilience before adversity. So if you take a person and you give them situations that allow for autonomy and responsibility, and you give them the ability to successfully take responsibility and successfully cope with stress and challenges, this increases their personal agency, enables for planning, self-reflection, and action, and actually helps them cope with new stressors. And this is really what, like, the core idea behind Jocko Willink's perspectives on radical responsibility and radical ownership, and how leaders that take full responsibility of their teams end up becoming better leaders and ideally coping better with stress. There's also resilience as a developmental trajectory with factors promoting resilience after adversity. So if you take a child and you put them in a family, basically you take a child who's been in a really abusive family, and then you have them placed into a family that is nurturing and loving, that can actually help cut off the past experience that they had and actually provide new experiences and opportunities to help them cope. One of the core concepts between stress and resilience is that too little stress will actually make us fragile, but too much stress can actually make us break. So our goal should be this central area of we need enough stimulation to get us to move and to get us to actually grow and to actually change and be strengthened by life's challenges. But we don't want it to break us down. We don't want to have chronic unremitting stress that can actually make us really, really sick. So resilience and coping, right? Like, basically brief challenges in life make us more resilient and help us cope for future challenges. This is really this idea of hormesis, really. It's like little bits of stress can make us stronger, but too few challenges can make us not prepared for the worst. I really love this paper. It's in Harvard Business Review. It's all about resilience. It's not about how you recharge. It's about how you recharge, not how you endure. And really this idea is that we're not really giving people this opportunity to fully recover from work. We're expecting people to work overtime. We're expecting people to work at all times. And this is making people sick. We're now the most stressed out country in the world, America. And, these high job demands, this means we need high recovery. So we need to take time to turn off. We need to take time to let our minds wander, to wander through nature, to be able to really just sometimes we get our best ideas when we're not working. And internal recovery is something that is basically like taking time throughout your day to recover and scheduled breaks. One of my friends, he actually has a shower installed in his work because he likes to take showers throughout the day in order to recover. That's different than external recovery. External recovery is happening outside of or after work. And the key to this is basically not spending your time off ruminating or perseverating on work stress, but to actually just enjoy life and recover with your family and do things that make you feel good. Really, the ideal situation is that you have a fulfilling work life, but you also have fulfilling recovery. And that combination between work and recovery will lead to you being in the zone of excellence. The problem with work without recovery is you end up with burnout or just feeling you're constantly in survival mode. If you don't have fulfilling work and you're always spending time off in recovery, you're just living a life of leisure, which in the end isn't very meaningful. So work-life balance. Well, interestingly, a lot of other countries do a better job than America in work-life balance, according to this study. So can we train a person to become more resilient? Well, I think so. I actually put heart rate variability monitors on my clients who are the most stressed out, who are the most burned out, and I use that to help teach them about their experiences with their bodies during stress so that they can learn to breathe themselves back into better coherence. So it turns out that when you're really stressed out, you're not breathing very deeply, you're breathing very shallow, your heart is essentially not in a coherent state. Your heart rate's high, your heart rate variability is low. And when you are able to move into a state of long, slow, deep breaths, just really noticing your breath, really just feeling your body and lowering your heart rate consciously through your breath, you'll increase your heart rate variability and you'll increase your heart's ability to respond to stress in the future. Heart rate variability, how and why does it work? Well, it works on the baroreceptors. And basically, our heart rate is going to become synced with our breathing rate. So if we breathe slow and shallow, our heart rate goes high. If we breathe low and slow, our heart rate goes low. And so we actually are able to modify our stress response through the relationship between breath and the baroreceptors. And you can actually increase your heart rate variability just through doing this a few times a day. Just slowing your breath, learning how to breathe slowly, and this actually can train your body to become more adapted to stress in the future. So the benefits of better HRV are that you're, basically, sorry, not the benefits to greater HRV, but the detriments to low HRV are it's associated with physical impairment, emotional impairment. Typically we see people with lower HRV be sicker, older, they're less aerobically fit, and they are more they're greater risk of dying. They're more physically compromised. So if you can increase your HRV through HRV training, through increasing your aerobic fitness, you can actually give your body the ability to adapt to stress and be more physically, emotionally resilient. So Leaf Therapeutics, as I mentioned, I love this company. You can get a leaf through getleaf.com and use the code Dr. Molly for 10% off. And basically this will show you when you are in a state of positive heart rate variability or low heart rate variability. And there's a bunch of other ways besides breathing that can boost vagal tone and improve your heart rate variability. I love taking cold showers. I love infrared sauna. I also like to sing in the shower. I do yoga. I love yin yoga. Mindfulness exercises in nature. I do loving kindness meditation. I love to laugh and watch videos. Positive social relationships are great, especially things that can, I know a lot of us are missing hugging, but hugging is actually really great for boosting resilience. Deep breathing, cultivating gratitude. I'm getting massage pretty regularly. I love, when I'm not under high stress, fasting is great for boosting vagal tone. When you're under high stress, I wouldn't recommend a lot of fasting. Tai Chi, even gargling can boost vagal tone. Acupuncture, acupressure mat, chewing gum, and actively reframing the experiences you don't have control over. So one step for quick coherence according to heart math is basically you just focus on this area of your heart. You just breathe more slowly, and you just kind of activate a positive feeling and just think I'm filled with loving kindness towards my mom or someone you really care about. And you just do that, and you just notice that your whole body just starts to shift. Mindfulness is not the same as meditation, but it's similar. And mindfulness is really just what I'd call subtle bodybuilding. It's really a variety of things that you can do to practice becoming more attuned to your body's natural rhythms. And mindfulness-based stress reduction is probably the most well-studied form of mindfulness. And it enhances immunity and psychosocial well-being and reduces inflammation. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can do mindfulness, but really the idea of mindfulness is that's just paying attention on purpose to the present moment and non-judgmentally to the unfolding of the experience moment by moment. So you're just noticing the experience of being present. It's really that simple. It's actually surprisingly not that complicated once you learn it. But I had to take a course called the Finder's Course to really get it hammered into my psyche on how to become more mindful. So some ways to practice mindfulness are very simple, just waking up in the morning, sitting still, maybe in a journal, writing your intention of the day, brushing your teeth, and just focusing on the experience of brushing your teeth. Walking a dog, exercising, just rather than doing, anything during, listening to things during exercise, you can just focus on the exercise. A lot of people run for mindfulness. Eating lunch and just being present with the experience of eating and not distracting yourself with TV. I'm guilty of that. Doing laundry and just focusing on the emotions of folding. While you're sitting and waiting, just absorbing the experience of what's going on around you. Whenever you fill up water, just notice the water filling and the sound of water filling up your cup, and just note the qualities of the sound of the visual experience, and then note gone when the bottle is filled or the water is boiled. So meditation. There are so many different kinds of meditation. I have been learning all sorts of styles, Vipassana style meditation, loving kindness meditation. Metta meditation is also a form of loving kindness meditation. Yoga Nidra, non-dual awareness. Basically, the whole point of meditation is to cultivate equanimity, focus attention, and sensory clarity. And the more you can cultivate equanimity within you, the better you will feel and the more you will be resilient. Meditation really trains adaptive attentional states. It's really the art of efficient and adaptive management of neurobehavioral energy with total engagement or disengagement. So it's basically like it's actually as powerful as drugs, and it's learning to be in the present moment and discover and appreciate the wonders of this infinite, ever new reality. Um, so gratitude is another form of increasing vagal tone. I practice gratitude almost every day because it makes me feel more positive and helps me start the day. Um, Essentially, anytime you can cultivate positive emotions, you can increase your resilience. It's really important more than ever to cultivate positive emotions because there's so many reasons to be negative. And if we watch the news and you doom scroll on your phone, you're inevitably going to become more and more negative. Gratitude also increases temporal synchronization between sorry, it's so gratitude is able to modulate heart rate, which enables um, temporal synchronization between dynamic functional connectivity and heart rate, um, which basically means that the more a person has gratitude, the more they're able to lower their heart rate, which is going to increase their HRV. And when someone thinks about resentment, the more they're able to increase their heart rate and decrease their HRV. So you can literally use your mind to modulate your feelings. And by just focusing on gratitude over things that make you sad or resentful, you can change your physiologic functioning. So letting go. I'm a big fan of this concept of letting go. There are so many things that we do not have control over that we focus on. Letting go of the political strife in the world, reframing, this is a time of great growth and transformation of America. Just breathing deep and just saying, you know what, I am letting go of all of the negativity around politics. Like, just letting go is literally a process that you should do whenever there is something in your life that you don't have control over, that you need to reframe, and you need to just move out of your life. Daily practices for building resilience: just taking big breaths, tuning into your body, and just centering yourself, and really just like learning to just breathe in, breathe out slowly, and feeling, positive things towards others, toward yourself. Just like really noticing your breath. That's where it all starts. It's just returning to the breath, returning to center point, center point, by the way, is below your belly button. Like, the daily practice of building resilience is always going to be returning to the breath. Because gasping messes up your biology. Gasping increases cortisol. It causes your heart to beat faster. It reduces heart rate variability. It just doesn't work for health. So we need to slow down our breath. We need to breathe deeper. We need to activate the calming relaxation response. We need to loosen our muscles, and we need to lower our blood pressure. And so diaphragmatic breathing, if you haven't heard of this, is a really, really great way to start. I had to learn how to breathe with my diaphragm when I was a kid. I actually had speech pathology because I was breathing with my chest because I was so stressed out. So I learned to breathe with my belly, and it actually changed the way that I spoke, and it actually opened my voice open. Belly breathing is really, really important for activating parasympathetic tone. It is basically what counteracts the sympathetic fight or flight response. So we can really improve our emotional regulation by just breathing deeply. Pursed lip breathing is something that, is basically a form of breathing that you might want to turn to when you notice yourself gasping or breathing shallow. It's really good for when you're anxious or hyperventilating. You just purse your breath and you breathe with a pursed breath. You can practice this a few times a day, and it helps you get into the correct breathing pattern. 4-7-8 breathing is also helpful. You basically breathe in Hold your breath and silently count from 1 to 7. And then when you breathe 8, you breathe all the air out of your lungs. So it's essentially you're breathing longer out than you're breathing in. And that's one of the ways that you can flip the switch into parasympathetic. Flowly is a really cool app. Flowy, actually. I'm sorry. It's Flowy. And it is, oh no, sorry, it's Flowly. I was right. Anyway, this app is an app that can teach you your resonant frequency of your breath that will be best useful for lowering your heart rate and increasing heart rate variability. And what it does is it uses the camera on your phone and it measures your heart rate variability, and it uses a breathing visualization to teach you what is your resonant frequency. For me, it's 7 breaths a minute. It may be different for you because everyone's bodies are different. Chewing gum is another thing you can do to increase your heart rate variability and increase your vagal tone. And it reduces the stress response and improves coping. Also, big fan of sauna, because sauna basically just causes vasodilation of your blood vessels, which will just naturally flip you into parasympathetic. Also increases mitochondrial biogenesis, which is awesome. And then I've actually been digging into the placebo, because the placebo response is actually has physiologic effects on the body. And there's like randomized controlled trials that show that placebo treatments can reduce stress, anxiety, and depression. So basically what the placebo does is it's triggered by, or what the placebo is, it's an effect that's triggered by manipulating verbal and social factors to induce a meaning response in the brain and resulting biological sequelae. But the thing is that different things can contribute to placebo and nocebo effects. Part of what makes it work is classical conditioning, verbal suggestion, and then also the social learning experience. So like part of the reason why placebo works is just the ritual of taking a pill, and the way that our brains associate that with healing. Essentially, the idea behind the placebo is that it activates the brain's inner pharmacy. And so it can produce real neurobiological phenomenon by modulating the body through the autonomic nervous system. And different people are more susceptible to the placebo than others. Typically, people that are the most susceptible are optimistic, suggestible, empathetic, and maybe slightly neurotic. Whereas people suggestible to the nocebo are likely to be pessimistic and have anxiety and catastrophize. All right, so now we're going to talk about resilience as a trait. So I like this section the most because it really, it's something that is just motivating in some ways. Resilience is this powering mechanism that draws your head up, moves you forward, and helps you persevere despite what obstacles you face along the way. So resilience empowers us to reappraise situations and regulate our emotions, and is comprised of optimism, creativity, and confidence. Resilience as a trait. Grit may be a correlate. So I like this image. Basically, it shows that grit's the space in between taking a hit and keeping going. And it was popularized by Duckworth, and it's basically conceived as perseverance in the face of challenges and experiencing passion in the pursuit of long-term goals. So it's comprised of 5 factors: courage, conscientiousness, long-term goal setting, resilience, and seeking excellence. Gritty people believe everything will be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end. Hardiness is also a correlate to grit, and it's comprised of 3 tenets: a belief that one can find meaningful purpose in life, a belief that one can influence one's surroundings, so control, and a belief that positive and negative experiences will lead to learning and growth. Planning and self-control are also features of resilience as a trait. In order to be resilient, you have to have this ability to plan and think through the future and think through strategies to help you cope. And also have to have self-control so that you don't end up letting the stress of difficult experiences degrade your health and lead to negative social outcomes like, alcoholism, smoking, or overeating. So can resilience be cultivated? Well, according to some scientific research, researchers have identified a few modifiable sources of resilience that can affect our health. First is a sense of purpose in life. And a correlate to this is, in part of having a sense of purpose in life is making meaning of your life. And then a sense of connection to others, and a sense of control. So a sense of purpose, I really want to talk about this because I think this is like one of the things that can separate people who thrive and people who fail to become resilient in the midst of stress. Finding your reason to live is about creating goals. It's about making sense of everyday actions and feeling like you have control over your life. So basically, meaning of life is strongly correlated to well-being, and having a feeling of purpose to one's existence is associated with better strategies of dealing with difficult and sometimes tragic experiences. And it may be protective against depression and suicide. So it's also been shown to be associated with longevity in older adults. Older adults who feel their lives have purpose may live longer. So there's this really great research out of Scandinavia, and basically there's this research on quality of life philosophy, and it's all about, this one paper is entitled "Seizing the Meaning of Life and Becoming Well Again." And I love this entire series of papers. You can find them on PubMed for free. But basically, it's about how taking responsibility is literally moving the barriers of our lives inside of ourselves. Taking responsibility for life means that you're willing to see that the real barriers are not these external ones, but something that can be found within you. Of course, there's an outside world that cannot be easily shaped according to our dreams. But a responsibility point of view is that although it's difficult, the problem is not impossible. It is your real challenge and task. This paper describes the philosophy about seizing the meaning of life and becoming well again, even when there's little time left. So basically, I love this quote. How do you fight for your life? How do you revitalize your whole existence? How do you regain the youth, life energy, and joyfulness? The reason so many people these days have any success with this project is that it's paradoxical. The fight is the fight of not fighting. It's the fight of letting go. It's about bringing all the futile efforts and worries to an end and being relaxed, present, natural, easygoing, and focus on the good things and balanced. So much easier said than done. But I constantly return to this paper because you have to keep reminding yourself that sometimes being resilient is not forcing things. Sometimes being resilient is just letting go. So finding meaning in life, coherence, distinguishing coherence, purpose, and significance. Purpose means having a set of core goals, aims at a direction of life. Coherence means having a sense of comprehensibility and one's life making sense. Significance is about sense of a life's inherent value and having a life worth living. So I'm going to break these different facets into separate slides because I think this is really important. I think to be resilient, you have to have a meaningful existence. And sometimes life seems really meaningless, and your job is to figure out how to make meaning out of signal. So first and foremost, there's a lot of nonsense out there. There's a lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of false truths. And so the first thing you need to do to make sense out of your life is to understand there's a war in sense making. And my friend Daniel Schmachtenberger is a wonderful human being who made this great video. And it really just shows that there's a lot of stuff out there that's designed to breed misinformation. So your job is to find good information. You are on a hero's journey. And so part of making sense of your life is actually writing your life story. And I actually, this at the beginning of COVID, I sat down and I drew a picture of the last 3 years of my life in this circular fashion. And I'm a synesthetics person. I have synesthesia. So I actually see time in space. I see it in a shape of an oval. And so I drew the years in each box as a month, and I drew it as a spiral. And I went through all of the major life events of my life and found that helped me make meaning of my experience of why I left, my hometown, why I went to the Bay, why I, made these decisions to, change my life, and how it brought me all this knowledge, and how I'm bringing all this knowledge back to my hometown and all the people that I know. And, you need to find your story. You need to find your hero's journey. So I hugely recommend reading Joseph Campbell's work, because part of making sense of life is actually writing the story of your life. I also recommend going to this website and reading these questions called the Dharma Inquiry. And these are questions that my friend Daniel wrote to help you identify your reason for living, your purpose for life. It helps you identify your capacities and your direction. Tips on goal setting, I would say, is setting goals should be done in different areas of your life, not just in your career, but in your education, in your relationships, in your physical health, in your experiential health, in your financial health, spirit, material goals, spiritual goals, psychological goals. You need to ask yourself, what do you want? When do you want it? Why do you want it? What would you get if you accomplished this? What would it cost you if you didn't get it? And how would you feel if you had it? Visualize feeling like you've already had that goal. How would you feel if you didn't get that goal? That's how you identify what are the worthy goals worth pursuing. And then like, it's also just really important to like set goals that are your goals, not goals imposed on you by society or expectations that others have for you, but like things that you really want, and not goals that are set by your profession or you being a woman or a man, but like just things that you really want to live for, things that will get you to jump out of bed in the morning and get started on whatever it is that you're working on. Who do you want to grow into? And ideally, goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, and realistic. And clarity is really the key when it comes to setting your goals. So one of the important things to have is that you have, ideally you want to have goals that are congruent with your values. And so what if you don't know your values? Well, your values are your most meaningful ideals and inspire you to persevere through adversity. So do you really even know what's important to you? What are your personal standards? I'm a really big fan of Ray Dalio's principles because he set his entire goal setting, principle making framework for his entire company. So like core values are some things that you see companies have, but you can also have these for your own life. And basically what you do is you come out, you take a list, you just list all the values that you can think of. And then you pick 5 and then you prioritize those 5. And then for each, you write what it means to you. And then what does success mean if you achieve living according to your values? And now the real test is like looking at your life and asking, does your life reflect your core values? Does your life reflect how you spend your time reflect your core values? I'm also really just a big believer that in order to have resilience, you have to have connection, as mentioned in the previous slide. It turns out that resilience and connection is not just important for resilience, but it's actually vital for staying alive. And there's actually some great TED Talks to watch. One of them is The Secret to Living Longer, maybe your social life. And another one is all about how, the things that brought men the most happiness in their life long term was close personal relationships. Social capital is also another facet of social connection. And so the more social connections that we have, the more resources that we have. And the more resources that we have to deal with, the more we're able to become resilient to major life stressors. So that's why it's really important to build strong social capital. Touch and safety signaling. So part of the reason why human connection is so important is because touch sends signals, touch from either our family, our partners, our friends, or even from just a masseuse. All touch does is that it sends the signal that we're safe. And we evolved to be living in community, not to be isolated. So it's super, super, super important to have, safety signaling and to to be touched by others. And social isolation and social exclusion basically is really not healthy long term. So it's actually been proposed that the physical pain system had been co-opted to signal when social relationships were a threat. So pain may have emerged for a variety of reasons. And physical pain I often see in people who are disconnected to their families or communities. I love this thing. I have it on right now. It's called the Apollo Neuro. And basically, you can get one for a discount if you go to Apollo Neuro. What it does is it vibrates, and it sends the specific vibrations that it's programmed with have been studied in randomized controlled clinical trials. And it sends the signals to your body that you're safe as though you're being touched, because it uses the touch pathways of your peripheral nervous system to send signals to your central nervous system that you're safe. So I use this to relax, to energize myself, to feel more coherent, and it really makes a huge difference in how I feel when I teach and when I present. So the last part of resilience as a trait in terms of the scientific evidence was the idea that, when you have control, you actually feel more resilient. And it turns out that studies in gerontology demonstrate that when older adults feel that they're in control of their life, they tend to live longer. So, why can resilience be tough to achieve? Well, the brain has a negativity bias, which makes it like Velcro for bad experience and Teflon for good ones. So, we tend to remember all of the negative things that we experience, and we don't focus on the positive feedback we get. And what's worse, when we're socially isolated, it actually makes our brains more sensitive to negativity. And so it creates this negativity bias, which isn't actually true. So what can we do to build resilience? Well, we deal with the bad and we turn to the good and we take in the good, which means letting it sink in, like calming and centering yourself and just like getting into nature and doing things that make you feel really, really, really centered. Meditating, resting, sleeping, exercising, eating healthy, connecting with others, connecting with nature, breath work, you name it, all the things that I talked about today. So, according to the American Psychological Association, ways to build resilience are maintaining relationships with close family members, friends, and others. We have to avoid seeing crises or stressful events as unbearable problems. That's really what reframing is about. Accepting circumstances that cannot be changed. Again, that's reframing. Developing realistic goals and moving towards them, as I've taught you. Taking decisive actions in adverse situations. Looking for opportunities for self-discovery after a struggle with loss, developing self-confidence, and keeping a long-term perspective and considering the stressful event in a broader context. Also, very important is maintaining a hopeful outlook, expecting good things, and visualizing what you wish to happen, and to take care of your mind and body and exercise regularly, paying attention to your own needs. So remember, a diamond is a chunk of coal that did well under pressure. Thank you.